When Gohan crashed into a Tau research facility instead of a battlefield, the entire galaxy made a fatal miscalculation. They thought his scholarly nature made him less dangerous than his father. But when the tyrannid hive mind itself diverted an entire fleet just to consume him, and chaos sorcerers targeted his guilt instead of his pride, the 41st Millennium learned that the quiet protector who fights from necessity is far more terrifying than the warrior who fights for joy. Could the son who always hated fighting be the one force capable of teaching a universe built on endless war how to actually win it? The research dome on Tau Colony Town shimmered under 3 pale suns, its crystal panels refracting light into rainbow patterns across sterile white floors. Earthcast scientist Shai stood before a towering scanner array, her 4-fingered hands dancing across holographic displays that showed readings she had never seen in 40 years of study. The equipment hummed with power as it analyzed a tear in space itself, a wound between dimensions that bled not the expected crimson of warp corruption, but a strange violet light that seemed almost alive. Commander Shadowsun should see this immediately, Shai said to her assistant, a younger scientist whose blue skin paled at the energy readings flooding their screens. This phenomenon matches no known classification. Not warp activity, not Necron phase technology, not even Eldar webway signatures. The rift expanded without warning, growing from the size of a fist to a gaping hole 3 meters wide in the span of a single heartbeat. Alarms shrieked through the facility as containment fields flared to life, trying desperately to stabilize the breach. Through the opening came not demons or hostile forces, but a single figure tumbling through empty air, his black hair wild and his gi torn. Gohan hit the laboratory floor hard, rolling twice before coming to rest against an analysis table that crumpled under the impact. The rift sealed itself as suddenly as it had opened, leaving only fading violet sparks that dissipated like dying embers. Gohan pushed himself to his feet slowly, his mind still reeling from the dimensional crossing. One moment, he had been training with Piccolo in the mountains near his home, practicing a new technique that pushed the boundaries of instant transmission. The next, reality itself had torn open and swallowed him whole, pulling him through a tunnel of impossible colors and sensations that defied description. He looked around the laboratory with confusion rather than fear, taking in the alien architecture and the blue-skinned beings who stared at him with expressions he could not read. Tau fire warriors burst through the sealed doors within seconds, their pulse rifles raised and targeting systems painting red dots across Gohan's chest. 12 warriors formed a perfect tactical formation, their movements precise and coordinated in a way that spoke of years of training and discipline. "Identify yourself," the lead warrior commanded through his helmet's speaker system, his voice flat and mechanical. "You have entered restricted Tau Empire territory. Any hostile action will result in immediate termination." Gohan raised his hands slowly, keeping them visible and open. His heart hammered in his chest, but he forced himself to remain calm, to think rather than react. This was not Earth. These were not humans. Whatever had happened during his training accident had taken him somewhere far from home, somewhere that felt wrong in ways he struggled to articulate. The very air tasted different here, thick with ozone and carrying undercurrents of something that made his skin crawl. "My name is Son Gohan," he said carefully, speaking clearly and making no sudden movements. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I was training and something went wrong. I think I might have crossed into another dimension by accident." Shai stepped forward despite the Fire Warrior's protests, her scientific curiosity overriding her sense of self-preservation. She approached Gohan with a scanner extended, its display showing energy patterns that made her breath catch in her throat. The readings were impossible. This creature before her, humanoid in appearance but clearly not human, radiated power that exceeded anything in her database. Yet the energy felt fundamentally different from warp corruption or psychic phenomena. It was pure, clean, almost crystalline in its structure. "Fascinating," she whispered, adjusting her scanner's sensitivity. "Your cellular structure alone defies conventional physics. The energy you contain should tear your body apart, yet it exists in perfect harmony with your physical form. How is this possible?" Gohan lowered his hands slightly, relief flooding through him at the scientist's curiosity rather than hostility. "Where I come from, we call it ki. It's life energy that flows through all living things. With training, you can sense it, control it, use it to push your body beyond normal limits." The laboratory doors opened again, and Commander Shadowsun entered, her crimson armor gleaming under the facility's lights. She moved with fluid grace that betrayed decades of combat experience, her every step calculated and purposeful. Behind her walked a delegation of officials and advisors, their expressions ranging from fascination to deep concern. Shadow Sun studied Gohan for long moments, her enhanced sensors feeding her information that confirmed what the scientists had already discovered. This was no ordinary being, no simple alien species to be catalogued and dismissed. "I am Commander Shadow Sun of the Fire Caste," she said, her voice carrying authority that needed no amplification. "You claim to be lost, to have arrived here by accident. We have protocols for first contact scenarios. If you cooperate fully and submit to examination, the Tau Empire can potentially assist in determining your origin and perhaps finding a way to return you home. However, any deception or hostility will be met with overwhelming force. Do you understand?" Gohan nodded, grateful for the reasonable approach. "I understand. I don't want to fight anyone. I just want to figure out where I am and how to get back to my family." The delegation began discussing the implications of Gohan's arrival in the Tau language, their words flowing too quickly for him to follow. He caught fragments of meaning through tone and body language. They were scared of him, that much was obvious, but also intrigued. The scientists especially seemed almost giddy with excitement at the research possibilities he represented. It reminded him of Bulma when she discovered new technology to study and dissect. Outside the research facility, the colony went about its daily routines. Watercaste merchants traded goods in covered markets. Earthcaste engineers maintained the city's infrastructure with quiet efficiency. Aircaste pilots guided supply ships through the planet's thin atmosphere. The colony represented the Tau Empire's ideals of cooperation and progress, a harmonious society working toward the greater good. It was peaceful in a way that Earth never quite managed, despite humanity's best efforts. That peace shattered without warning. The sky above the colony turned black as if a switch had been flipped, blocking out all three suns simultaneously. Shadow Sun's communicator erupted with panicked reports from orbital defense platforms, their operators screaming about massive biological signatures emerging from the void. Gohan felt it before the sensors detected it, a presence vast and hungry descending toward the colony like a plague given physical form. The tyrannids hit the colony's shields with the force of a tsunami, billions of organisms hurling themselves at the energy barriers with mindless determination. Gaunts and Genestealers led the assault, their chitinous bodies absorbing pulse rifle fire that should have vaporized them. Behind them came larger organisms, tyrannid warriors and carnifexes that shook the ground with each thundering step. The sky filled with gargoyles and harpies, their shrieks drowning out all other sound. Gohan watched through the laboratory's reinforced windows as civilians ran for evacuation shelters, parents clutching children while fire warriors established defensive positions. He saw a young Tau girl, no older than Pan, stumble and fall in the chaos. A Genestealer broke through the line and rushed toward her, its four arms ending in claws designed to rend flesh from bone. The child screamed, a sound of pure terror that cut through Gohan like a physical blow. Something inside him broke. Not his body or his mind, but the careful restraint he had built over years of choosing peace over violence. These were innocent people, families, children, and they were about to be slaughtered by monsters that felt no mercy, offered no quarter, existed only to consume and multiply. His transformation happened without conscious thought. Violet lightning crackled around his body as his hair stood on end and shifted to golden blonde. His eyes changed from black to teal, blazing with power that made every sensor in the facility scream warnings. But this was not the wild, joyful transformation of a Saiyan seeking strong opponents. This was cold, focused. The transformation of someone who had seen too much death and refused to allow one more innocent life to be stolen. Gohan moved faster than Tau sensors could track. One moment he stood in the laboratory, the next he materialized between the Genestealer and the fallen girl. His hand shot out and caught the creature's descending claw, stopping its strike with such absolute force that the impact created a shockwave that shattered windows for 50 meters in every direction. The Genestealer had no time to react before Gohan's other hand punched through its reinforced carapace and out the other side, killing it instantly. He set the girl down gently behind Fire Warrior lines, his face a mask of controlled fury. Then he turned to face the tyrannid swarm with the cold calculation of a scholar who had studied every fighting technique the universe had to offer and now applied them with surgical precision. No wasted movement. No unnecessary destruction. Just systematic, methodical elimination of every threat that dared harm the innocent. The colony's defenders watched in awe and terror as Gohan tore through the tyrannid vanguard like a purple comet, each strike perfectly placed to kill without collateral damage. This was not the reckless power of a warrior drunk on battle. This was something far more dangerous. This was a protector who had chosen violence not from desire but from necessity, and that made all the difference in the galaxy. The aftermath of the tyrannid assault left the colony in shocked silence. Gohan stood at the center of a killing field stretching 2 kilometers in every direction, his golden hair slowly fading back to black as his transformation released. Around him lay the bodies of thousands of tyrannid organisms, each killed with such precision that not a single building had been damaged in the battle. Fire warriors lowered their weapons slowly, uncertain whether to celebrate their survival or fear the being who had made it possible. Commander Shadowsun approached carefully, her armor's sensors still screaming warnings about the energy residue that clung to Gohan like morning fog. She had fought the tyrannids for decades, had seen entire worlds consumed by the endless swarms, yet this single being had accomplished in minutes what her best warriors could not achieve in days of sustained combat. The implications terrified her even as they fascinated her tactical mind. "You saved us," she said simply, stopping 3 meters from where Gohan knelt, catching his breath. "The colony owes you a debt that cannot be easily repaid. The Tau Empire does not forget such acts." Gohan looked up at her, his expression weary and sad rather than triumphant. "I couldn't just stand by and watch innocent people die, but I don't understand this place. Why were those creatures attacking? What did you do to make them so angry?" Shadowsun's silence spoke volumes. She gestured for him to follow her back to the command center, a fortified building that had weathered the tyrannid assault behind multiple layers of shielding. Inside, holographic displays showed star maps and tactical readouts that meant nothing to Gohan's untrained eyes. Other Tau officials gathered, their faces showing the same mixture of gratitude and uncertainty that Shadowsun wore. "The creatures you fought are called tyrannids," she explained, pulling up images of the various organism types on a central display. "They are not native to this galaxy. They come from beyond the rim of known space, consuming all biological matter in their path. They do not negotiate. They do not retreat. They exist only to feed and multiply. Your actions today saved 40,000 lives, but the swarm you destroyed was merely a scouting force. The main hive fleet will arrive within days." Gohan felt his stomach drop. The horror of what he had just fought, multiplied by thousands or millions, descending on this peaceful colony. "Then we need to evacuate everyone immediately. Get them away from here before the main force arrives." "Evacuation procedures have already begun," Shadowsun confirmed, "but you have raised questions that demand answers. What are you? Where do you come from? And most importantly, will you help us fight what is coming?" Over the following days, Gohan became both guest and subject of intense study. Scientist Shai worked around the clock analyzing his energy signatures, his cellular structure, his seemingly impossible physical capabilities. She discovered that his power came not from technology or genetic engineering, but from trained control of life energy itself. The concept fascinated the Tau, whose empire was built on technology and reason rather than mystical forces. Gohan spent hours in the colony's archives, reading everything he could access about this strange universe he had fallen into. The more he learned, the more horrified he became. This was a galaxy at perpetual war, where billions died every day in conflicts that spanned star systems. Humans here lived under a brutal theocratic government that treated its citizens as expendable resources. Alien species fought for survival against extinction on dozens of fronts simultaneously. Worse still were the beings called Chaos Gods, entities that fed on suffering and corruption, twisting souls into weapons against the living. It reminded him of the darkest periods of his own universe, when beings like Frieza and Cell had threatened entire planets. But here, that level of threat was constant, unending, woven into the very fabric of reality itself. The knowledge weighed on him like physical pressure, making sleep difficult and rest impossible. Word of the Purple Demon spread through Tau communication networks with the speed of light. Other colonies requested information, wanted to know if this new ally could be deployed to defend their worlds. The Tau High Command debated the strategic implications of Gohan's presence, weighing the benefits of his power against the risks of dependence on an unknown variable. Some advocated for immediate alliance. Others counseled caution, arguing that any being with such power could not be trusted. The Imperium of Man heard the reports through captured Tau communications and spy networks that had operated in enemy territory for decades. Inquisitor Gregor Eisenhorn, a man who had spent centuries hunting threats to humanity, flagged Gohan's presence as a matter requiring immediate investigation. The description matched no known Xenos species, no recorded daemon manifestation, no psychic phenomenon in Imperial databases. That alone made Gohan dangerous beyond measure, for the unknown was always the deadliest threat. Eisenhorn dispatched a kill team of Deathwatch Space Marines to observe and, if necessary, eliminate the anomaly. These were not the brutal Space Wolves or the rigid Ultramarines, but specialists drawn from multiple chapters and trained to fight Xenos threats that defied conventional tactics. They established observation posts on moons surrounding the Tau colony, their sensors locked on Gohan's energy signature, watching and waiting for the right moment to strike. 3 weeks after his arrival, Gohan sat in a meditation garden the Tau had built for his use, attempting to center himself through techniques Piccolo had taught him years ago. The garden reminded him of home, with carefully tended plants and artificial streams that mimicked Earth's natural beauty. He missed his family desperately. Chi-Chi would be worried sick by now. Videl probably thought he was dead, and Pan, his precious daughter, would be asking when Daddy was coming home. A disturbance in the colony's outer sectors pulled him from his meditation. Fire warriors were mobilizing in response to reports of Space Marine infiltration. Gohan arrived at the scene to find Shadow Sun's forces in a tense standoff with a squad of armored giants whose power armor bore the black and silver colors of the Death Watch. Their leader, a sergeant named Artemis, pointed a bolt pistol directly at Gohan's chest. "In the name of the God Emperor of mankind, identify yourself, Xenos," Artemis demanded, his voice amplified through his helmet to thunderous volume. "You stand accused of corrupting Imperial allies with Xenos philosophy and demonstrating powers beyond natural law. Submit to custody or be destroyed." Gohan stepped forward slowly, hands raised in a peaceful gesture that seemed almost mocking given the power he had displayed weeks earlier. "I'm not your enemy. I'm just trying to find a way home." Why does everyone in this universe assume violence is the only answer? "Because it is," Artemis replied coldly. "This galaxy knows only war. Peace is a lie told by the weak to justify their cowardice. Your presence corrupts the natural order. Your power tempts others to abandon the Emperor's protection. You are a threat that must be eliminated." The philosophical difference crystallized in that moment. Gohan saw beings who had been ground down by endless conflict until they could no longer imagine alternatives to violence. Artemis saw a naive idealist who did not understand the harsh realities required for survival. Neither could bridge the gap between their worldviews. Shadow Sun ordered her fire warriors to stand down, recognizing that any conflict between Space Marines and Gohan would devastate the colony regardless of who won. But Gohan made no move to fight. Instead, he spoke with quiet conviction that somehow carried more weight than shouted threats. "I've met warriors like you before," he said, looking directly at Artemis despite the bolt pistol aimed at his heart. "So convinced that strength requires you to throw away everything that makes you human. You think compassion is weakness. You think questioning orders is betrayal. You've sacrificed so much of yourselves to survive that you can't remember what you're surviving for." Artemis fired. The bolt shell crossed the distance between them in a fraction of a second, programmed to penetrate armor and detonate inside the target's body. Gohan caught it between 2 fingers, his movement too fast for normal eyes to follow. He crushed the shell carefully, containing its explosion within his palm, then let the smoking fragments fall harmlessly to the ground. "I'm not going to fight you," Gohan continued, his voice sad rather than angry. "Because you're doing what you think is right, even if I disagree with your methods. But I won't let you hurt these people either. So we're at an impasse." The standoff ended not with violence, but with orders from higher authority. Artemis received encrypted communications from Inquisitor Eisenhorn himself, directing the Death Watch to observe rather than engage. The anomaly had demonstrated restraint under direct provocation, showing that it could be reasoned with rather than simply destroyed. Such beings were rare enough to warrant further study before elimination. As the Space Marines withdrew, Gohan felt a new weight settle onto his shoulders. He had made enemies of the Imperium, the dominant human power in this galaxy. His presence had created diplomatic incidents and military complications that rippled across multiple star systems. Yet he could not bring himself to regret his choices. Standing by while innocents suffered would have been a betrayal of everything Piccolo and his father had taught him. The weeks that followed became a crash course in galactic politics and philosophy. Gohan met with Tau philosophers who debated the greater good versus individual freedom. He read Imperial texts that justified atrocities in the name of species survival. He even studied captured chaos grimoires, protected from their corrupting influence by his pure ki, learning about the psychological warfare the dark gods waged on mortal minds. The more he learned, the more he understood why this universe had become so dark. It was not that the people here were inherently evil or cruel. They had simply been ground down by millennia of constant threat, until pragmatic brutality became their default response to any problem. The Imperium sacrificed billions to protect trillions. The Tau erased individual identity to achieve collective efficiency. Even the supposed good factions had been forced to make compromises that would horrify anyone from Gohan's peaceful Earth. Yet he also found glimmers of hope. Individual soldiers who showed mercy when protocol demanded execution. Scientists who pursued knowledge despite dogma forbidding inquiry. Commanders who sought diplomatic solutions before military ones. These people reminded him that even in the darkest universe, the spark of compassion could survive if protected and nurtured. His studies were interrupted by another crisis. A hive world called Septimus Prime reported Genestealer cult activity in its lower levels. These were not the mindless tyrannid organisms Gohan had fought before, but hybrid creatures that retained human intelligence while serving the hive mind. They infiltrated societies over generations, spreading their genetic infection through reproduction, preparing entire worlds for consumption from within. Gohan volunteered to investigate, seeing it as an opportunity to prove his value as an ally rather than a threat. Shadow Sun granted permission but insisted on sending a Tau strike team as backup and observers. Together they descended into the hive world's underbelly, a nightmare landscape of industrial decay and human misery where billions lived in darkness, never seeing the sun. The cult had infected thousands, perhaps tens of thousands of citizens. Gohan could sense their twisted life energies, recognizing the tyrannid taint that overwrote their human essence. But these were not simple monsters to be destroyed. They had been people once, with families and dreams and hopes, before the genetic curse claimed them. Many still appeared fully human, showing no outward signs of infection. Tracking the cult to its central nest, Gohan witnessed horrors that would haunt him for years. Children born as grotesque hybrids, their bodies twisted by alien genetics. Parents who willingly sacrificed their humanity to the cult's promises of transcendence. Mind-controlled citizens who served as unwitting spies and saboteurs. The entire operation was a cancer eating the hive world from within, and the only cure was complete excision. His protective instinct warred with his compassion. These people were victims, but they were also threats. They would feel no remorse about betraying their fellow humans to the tyrannid swarm. They could not be reasoned with or saved, their minds fully subsumed by the hive mind's psychic network. Yet destroying them meant killing thousands who might have been innocent just months or years ago. The decision crystallized when he witnessed the cult preparing to release toxic spores into the hive's water supply, an act that would infect millions overnight. There was no time for evacuation, no possibility of containment, no alternative to immediate action. Gohan transformed into his ultimate form, his power restrained but his resolve absolute. What followed was systematic extermination. Gohan moved through the cult's warren like a surgical blade, eliminating infected individuals with precision that prevented collateral damage. He felt each death as a personal failure, another life he could not save, another victim he had to become executioner for. The Tau strike team watched in silence, recognizing the toll the battle took on Gohan's conscience even as they marveled at his efficiency. By the time he finished, 5,000 cult members lay dead, and the infection had been contained. But Gohan emerged from the underhive changed, his eyes haunted by what he had been forced to do. He had killed not in battle or self-defense, but in calculated genocide against beings who could not be saved. It was a line he had never crossed before, and the weight of it threatened to crush him. That night, as he sat alone in his quarters aboard the Tau vessel, Gohan felt something brush against his mind. Not the psychic communication of the Tau or the mechanical augments of the Imperium, but something older and more insidious. Voices whispered at the edge of his consciousness, offering comfort for his guilt, promising power to prevent future tragedies, suggesting that his restraint was weakness rather than strength. He recognized the touch of chaos, the corruption that had claimed so many in this dark universe. The voices spoke to his deepest fears and doubts, weaponizing his compassion against him. They whispered that his power made him responsible for all suffering he failed to prevent. They suggested that embracing darker methods would let him save more lives. They promised to take away the pain if he would only surrender his will to forces beyond mortal comprehension. Gohan's transformation flickered, his golden aura unstable as psychological warfare succeeded where physical combat had failed. His mind filled with visions of everyone he had failed to save, every death he might have prevented if only he had been faster, stronger, more willing to sacrifice his principles for practical results. The guilt threatened to drown him, pulling him down into despair that the Chaos Gods could exploit and corrupt. The corruption spread through Gohan's mind like ink through water, turning every positive memory into a weapon of self-doubt. He saw his father dying to Cell, a death he could have prevented if only he had stopped holding back sooner. He saw Piccolo sacrificing himself against Nappa, a loss that might never have happened if Gohan had been braver as a child. Every failure, every moment of hesitation, every choice to show mercy that had led to suffering, all of it weaponized against him by intelligences that had spent millions of years perfecting the art of psychological torture. His transformation destabilized completely, flickering between Super Saiyan forms as his control shattered. Golden lightning arced from his body, scorching the walls of his quarters and setting off alarms throughout the Tau vessel. Shadow Sun's voice crackled over the intercom, demanding to know what was happening, but Gohan could not answer. The voices in his head grew louder, drowning out everything else, offering solutions that required only small compromises at first. "Just accept a little anger," they whispered. "Use your rage to protect more effectively. What is fury but passion directed toward righteous ends? Just embrace pragmatic cruelty," they suggested. "Kill the potentially infected before they spread their taint. What is ruthlessness but wisdom applied without sentiment? Just take what you need," they offered. "Your family waits at home while you waste time on strangers. What is selfishness but proper prioritization of those who matter most?" Each suggestion sounded almost reasonable in isolation, tiny steps down a path that led to damnation. Gohan's defenses crumbled as exhaustion and guilt overwhelmed his training. He had been strong enough to resist physical threats, but this attack targeted his greatest weakness, his compassionate heart that bled for every life he could not save. The Chaos Gods recognized that purity could be corrupted more easily than wickedness, for the pure had further to fall. The psychic assault reached its peak as Gohan's power spiraled out of control. His energy signature blazed across the sector like a second sun, visible to every faction with the sensors to detect it. The tyrannid hive mind, always seeking the strongest biomass to consume, adjusted the course of an entire hive fleet. Billions of organisms across dozens of bioships altered trajectory, converging on coordinates that promised genetic material of unprecedented value. The hive mind felt no emotion, experienced no desire beyond the biological imperative to feed and grow, yet something in Gohan's energy pattern triggered its most aggressive hunting protocols. Aboard the craft world that drifted at the system's edge, Farseer Eldrad Ulthran felt the disturbance in the warp and recognized both danger and opportunity. The Eldar had monitored Gohan's arrival through their divination, seeing possible futures branch and twist around his presence. In some timelines, his power accelerated the galaxy's descent into final darkness. In others, he became a catalyst for change that offered slim hope of avoiding the worst outcomes. The current moment represented a critical junction, a point where intervention might shift probability toward the better futures. Eldrad moved through the infinity circuit of his craft world, his consciousness touching the preserved souls of countless dead Eldar, seeking their wisdom and perspective. The decision to aid a human, even one from beyond this reality, was not made lightly. The Eldar had sacrificed too much, lost too many worlds, suffered too greatly at humanity's hands to easily extend trust. Yet the visions were clear. If Gohan fell to chaos here, the Tyrannid fleet would consume him and gain access to power that would make them unstoppable. If he could be saved, stabilized, guided, he might yet serve as a shield against worse fates. The Farseer materialized in Gohan's quarters through a webway portal, his ancient presence cutting through the chaos corruption like a blade through fog. He appeared as a tall, impossibly thin figure wrapped in robes that seemed woven from starlight and shadow. His helmet bore runes that hurt to look at directly, and his staff crackled with psychic energy that made the air taste of ozone and old metal. "Enough," Eldrad commanded, his voice carrying power that resonated on frequencies beyond normal hearing. He raised his staff and struck the floor, and the chaos whispers recoiled as if burned. "You tread upon the edge of damnation, child of another universe. The dark gods would claim you, twist your strength into service of entropy and suffering. I have seen the futures where you fall, and they are dark beyond measure." Gohan collapsed to his knees, gasping for breath as the psychic pressure eased. His transformation faded completely, leaving him in his base form, trembling and drenched in sweat. "Who are you? What's happening to me?" "I am Eldrad Ulthrin, Farseer of Craftworld Ulthwi," the Eldar replied, lowering his staff but maintaining his protective ward against the warp. "What you experienced was the touch of chaos, the primordial forces that feed upon emotion and ambition. They sensed your guilt and sought to corrupt it, to transform your protective nature into a weapon against yourself and all you hold dear." Eldrad extended one long-fingered hand, helping Gohan to his feet with surprising gentleness. "You stand at a crossroads. The path you walked before, trying to save everyone, protecting all innocence, accepting responsibility for all suffering you witness. That path leads only to madness in this galaxy. There is too much death, too much suffering, too much darkness for any single being to shoulder, no matter how powerful." The Farseer guided Gohan to sit, then settled across from him with the patient calm of one who had lived for millennia. "But there is wisdom beyond the extremes. Protection does not mean preventing all death, for death is as natural as life. It means preserving what makes existence worth continuing. Hope, beauty, love, the capacity for growth and change. These are what matter, not the mere continuation of biological function." Gohan listened, his mind clearing as Eldrad's presence stabilized the warp around them. The words echoed teachings he had received from Piccolo years ago, but with a depth born from experience that spanned ages. "But how do I choose? How do I decide who to save and who to let die? Every life matters. Every person lost is a tragedy." "Every life does matter," Eldrad agreed, his tone gentler than Gohan expected from the ancient warrior. "But you cannot live every life, cannot fight every battle, cannot prevent every death. This is the burden of power, the curse of capability. You must choose where to direct your strength, accepting that your choices mean others will suffer in places you cannot reach." The Farseer stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the stars that filled the void beyond the ship. "My people once ruled this galaxy, commanded power beyond your comprehension. We thought ourselves invincible, immortal, beyond consequence. Our arrogance birthed a god of excess and damnation that consumed our empire in a single moment of apocalyptic birth. Trillions died. Our civilization shattered. We survivors are all that remain of a race that once numbered in the quintillions." He turned back to Gohan, and though his face was hidden behind his helmet, his voice carried depths of sorrow that no mask could conceal. "We learned through ultimate tragedy what you must understand before corruption claims you. Power without wisdom is simply another form of destruction. Strength without purpose is wasted effort that benefits no one. You cannot save this galaxy, child. It is too broken, too far gone, too deeply corrupted by millennia of war and suffering. But you can preserve fragments of worth within it, protecting specific people and ideals so that something survives for potential futures." Gohan felt tears streaming down his face as the weight of Eldrad's words settled into his soul. "So I just accept that people will die? That I could have saved them but chose not to? How is that any different from the cruelty I've seen everywhere in this universe?" "It is different because your choices come from wisdom rather than callousness," Eldrad replied, returning to sit before Gohan. "The Imperium kills from fear and dogma. Chaos corrupts from malice and hunger. The tyrannids consume from biological imperative. You would choose from understanding, recognizing that preserving yourself, your principles, your capacity for compassion, these serve the greater good more than burning yourself out in futile attempts to fix the unfixable." The Farseer's staff glowed softly as he channeled psychic energy into a vision that filled the air between them. Gohan saw himself in multiple timelines, each showing different outcomes. In one, he tried to save everyone, and fell to chaos from the guilt of his inevitable failures. In another, he became as cold and pragmatic as the Imperium, losing his humanity in pursuit of maximum efficiency. In a third, he died fighting the tyrannid swarm, his power consumed and added to the hive mind's genetic library. But in one timeline, one narrow path, he maintained his principles while accepting his limitations, becoming a teacher rather than a warrior, spreading knowledge rather than wielding power directly. "This is the path that offers hope," Eldrad explained, pointing to the final vision. "Not salvation, for this galaxy is beyond saving, but preservation of what matters most. Your techniques, your philosophy, your understanding of inner strength, these can be taught to others, allowing your influence to spread beyond what your personal power could accomplish alone." Before Gohan could respond, alarm screamed throughout the Tau vessel. Shadow Sun's voice erupted from every speaker, her normally calm tone edged with panic. All hands to battle stations. Tyrannid Hive Fleet detected at system edge. Estimated arrival in 6 hours. Fleet size beyond conventional measurement. This is not a raid. This is an extinction-level swarm. Eldrad stood smoothly, his posture betraying no surprise. The hive mind comes for you specifically. It sensed your power and diverted an entire fleet to claim your genetic material. If it succeeds, the Tyrannids will gain access to abilities that transcend this universe's physical laws. They will become truly unstoppable. Gohan felt ice flood his veins as the implications sank in. His presence had not just complicated local conflicts, it had drawn a threat that could consume dozens of worlds. Every life that would be lost in the coming battle would be his responsibility, his fault, his failure to contain the consequences of his own power. "I have to fight them," he said, standing on legs that trembled with exhaustion and lingering corruption. "I brought this threat here. I have to stop it before it spreads to other worlds." "Alone, you would die," Eldrad stated flatly. "The hive mind learns from every encounter, adapts to every threat. It has observed your fighting style through the vanguard organisms you destroyed. The main fleet brings specialized hunter organisms designed specifically to counter your techniques. They will drain your energy, absorb your attacks, overwhelm you through sheer numbers while studying your every move." The Farseer's staff blazed brighter as he opened a larger webway portal. "But you need not fight alone. I have seen the futures where cooperation offers slim hope of survival. The Tau will provide ranged support and orbital strikes. My craft world will commit forces despite the risk to Eldar lives. Even the Imperium's forces in nearby systems may be convinced to aid once they understand the threat magnitude." Gohan wiped his tears away, his resolve hardening despite his fear and exhaustion. "Then we make a stand here. We protect this system and everyone in it. But I need to understand something first. These creatures, the Tyrannids, do they have consciousness? Do they think and feel? Or are they just biological machines following programming?" Eldrad considered the question carefully before answering. The lesser organisms are indeed mindless, controlled entirely by the hive mind's will. But the hive mind itself possesses a form of intelligence, vast and alien beyond comprehension. It does not experience emotions as you understand them, feels no malice or cruelty, but it is aware. It calculates, adapts, learns. Whether such awareness constitutes true consciousness or simply extremely sophisticated biological computation remains debated, even among my people. "So they're like a natural disaster," Gohan concluded, his analytical mind processing the information despite his emotional turmoil. "A hurricane doesn't hate the people it kills. It's just following physical laws. The Tyrannids don't hate us. They're just following their biological imperative to feed and grow." "A reasonable analogy," Eldrad agreed, though one that offers no comfort to their victims. A hurricane may be mindless, but it remains deadly. The Tyrannids may lack malice, but they will consume you just as thoroughly as any hateful enemy. The Tau vessel shuddered as it began evasive maneuvers, fleeing before the approaching swarm while buying time for colony evacuations. Gohan moved to the viewport and stared out at the void where sensors detected the hive fleet's approach. He could feel them now, a pressure against his key sense like a vast weight pressing down on reality itself. Billions of organisms acting as one, directed by an intelligence that spanned light years, united in purpose beyond anything human or Saiyan could fully comprehend. His hands clenched into fists as he wrestled with the decision before him. Eldrad was right that he could not save everyone, could not prevent all suffering, could not shoulder responsibility for an entire galaxy's worth of tragedy. But these people, this specific colony, this particular fight, here he could make a difference. Here he could draw a line and say no further. "I'll need to push beyond Super Saiyan 2, he said quietly, more to himself than to Eldrad. "Maybe even risk transforming into my ultimate form for an extended period. The energy expenditure will be massive, and I don't know if my body can handle the strain in this universe where the rules are different." "Your body will endure or it will fail," Eldrad replied with the blunt honesty of his people. "But your spirit concerns me more. You teeter on the edge of the abyss even now. If you enter battle while chaos corruption still lingers in your mind, you risk losing yourself to rage or despair mid-combat. The dark gods would delight in claiming you at the moment of your greatest heroism, transforming your sacrifice into their victory." Gohan turned from the viewport to face the Farseer directly. Then teach me. You said protection means preserving what makes life worth living. Help me understand how to fight without losing myself to the darkness. Show me how to accept my limitations without surrendering my principles. Eldrad studied him for long moments, his psychic senses probing Gohan's soul for signs of irredeemable corruption. Finally, he nodded slowly. The techniques of our people require decades to master, but I can offer you meditation practices to center your spirit and ward your mind against warp intrusion. They will not make you immune to chaos, nothing can, but they will provide protection if you maintain focus. The next 5 hours passed in intensive training unlike anything Gohan had experienced before. Eldrad guided him through mental exercises that felt like fighting invisible opponents inside his own mind. Each time the chaos whispers tried to resurface, Gohan learned to recognize them as external intrusions rather than his own thoughts. Each time guilt threatened to overwhelm him, he practiced accepting the emotion without letting it control his actions. The meditation techniques Eldrad taught became Gohan's anchor as the Tyrannid hive fleet entered real space at the system's edge. Through the viewport, he watched with enhanced vision as the void itself seemed to writhe with life. Bioships the size of continents emerged from the warp, their organic hulls pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that served as communication between the fleet's components. Smaller organisms swarmed between the capital ships like schools of fish, each one a weapon designed for specific tactical purposes. The hive mind had come in force, bringing enough biomass to strip a dozen worlds clean in a matter of weeks. Gohan felt the weight of every life depending on him settle onto his shoulders, but this time he did not let it crush him. Eldrad's teachings echoed in his mind, reminding him that he could only control his own actions, not outcomes. He would fight with everything he had, protect everyone he could reach, and accept that his best might not be enough. The acceptance brought peace rather than despair, a calm center in the storm of approaching violence. Shadowsun coordinated the defensive fleet from her command vessel, her tactical displays showing force compositions that made victory seem impossible. 3 Tau warships, 2 Eldar cruisers from Eldrad's craft world, and a single Imperial strike cruiser that had responded to distress calls despite political tensions. Against them came a swarm that numbered in the billions, backed by bioships capable of consuming planets. The only advantage the defenders possessed was Gohan himself, a variable the hive mind had never encountered before and could not fully predict. The scientist Shai approached Gohan in the staging area where he prepared for deployment. She carried a data slate filled with readings and calculations, her expression mixing scientific excitement with genuine concern. I have analyzed your energy patterns extensively over the past weeks. Your power operates on principles entirely foreign to this universe. The Tyrannids will attempt to absorb and adapt to your techniques, but I believe there is a way to prevent this. She pulled up holographic projections showing cellular structures and energy flows. Your key works by channeling life force through your body in specific patterns. The Tyrannids consume and incorporate genetic material, but your energy is not encoded in DNA. If you can maintain continuous output without allowing your cells to be captured intact, the hive mind cannot learn your abilities. You must burn hot enough that nothing remains for them to study. Gohan understood the implication immediately. He would need to fight at maximum power from the beginning, with no holding back, no restraint, no measured escalation. It went against every instinct his father and Piccolo had taught him about conserving energy for long battles. But this was not a tournament or a duel. This was survival, and the rules were different. I'll need to transform into my ultimate form and maintain it for the entire battle, he said, running calculations in his mind about energy expenditure and physical strain. That will give me the power output necessary, but I don't know how long I can sustain it. An hour maybe, possibly 2, if I push beyond safe limits. Shai nodded, her expression grim. The evacuation will require at least 90 minutes to complete. Every ship in the colony is loaded beyond capacity, but there are still civilians waiting for transport. If you can hold the swarm for that long, we can save most of the population. Most, not all. The word hung between them like a physical presence. Thousands would die regardless of how well Gohan fought, simply because there was not enough time or transport capacity to save everyone. He felt the old guilt trying to rise but pushed it down using Eldrad's techniques. He would save who he could and honor those he could not by living with the memory, rather than being destroyed by it. The battle began when the first wave of Tyrannid organisms entered weapons range. Tau railguns opened fire, their hypervelocity rounds punching through chitin and flesh with devastating efficiency. Eldar bright lances carved burning lines through the swarm, each shot precisely calculated to eliminate organisms before they could adapt. The Imperial strike cruiser unleashed macro-cannon salvos that detonated like miniature suns, vaporizing hundreds of creatures with each blast. Yet for every organism destroyed, 10 more took its place, an endless tide that absorbed losses without pause or concern. Gohan launched from the Tau vessel in his ultimate form, his white aura blazing like a newborn star against the void's darkness. He had learned to survive in space through key control, creating a protective field that provided oxygen and pressure while allowing him to move with impossible speed. The transformation felt different here than it did at home, as if reality itself resisted his power, but he pushed through the resistance and stabilized at maximum output. The tyrannids responded immediately to his presence. Specialized hunter organisms broke from the main swarm, bioships disgorging creatures specifically designed to counter high-energy targets. Hiveguard with impaler cannons that could punch through tank armor, zoanthropes whose psychic screams could shatter minds, carnifexes enhanced with energy absorption organs harvested from 1,000 consumed species. The hive mind threw everything it had at Gohan, recognizing him as the primary threat to its feeding operation. He met them head-on, his fists moving faster than human sensors could track. Each punch carried enough force to shatter starship hulls, released in controlled bursts that vaporized targets completely. He used the Kamehameha wave in rapid succession, blue energy beams that carved through the swarm like a blade through water. The techniques his father had perfected, the discipline Piccolo had taught him, all of it came together in a display of martial perfection that transformed space combat into an art form. But the hive mind learned with terrifying speed. After the first 20 minutes, organisms began dodging his attacks with precognitive accuracy, their movements guided by calculations based on observed patterns. Bioweapons adapted to drain his ki rather than simply damage his body, specialized organs evolving in real time to counter his techniques. The swarm shifted tactics continuously, probing for weaknesses, testing different approaches, gathering data with each exchange. Gohan felt his energy reserves depleting faster than anticipated. The constant maximum output combined with the universe's resistance to his power created a drain that exceeded all previous battles. Sweat evaporated instantly in the void's cold, and his muscles screamed protests that he ignored through sheer willpower. He could not afford to slow down, could not reduce his power output even slightly, or the tyrannids would overwhelm him through sheer numbers. Eldrad's craft world entered the battle zone, its weapons adding precision strikes to the defensive effort. The Farseer himself fought from the craft world's infinity circuit, his consciousness directing Eldar forces with supernatural coordination. Wraith constructs piloted by dead warriors' souls moved through the swarm, their weapons firing in patterns that created kill zones the tyrannids struggled to penetrate. Yet even Eldar technology and psychic might could only slow the tide, not stop it. The Imperial strike cruiser took catastrophic damage as a bioship latched onto its hull, acid secretions eating through armor plating while boarding organisms invaded the interior. Gohan sensed the desperation of the crew as they fought deck by deck, space marines and regular crew alike dying to organisms that adapted to their weapons after the first few engagements. He wanted to help, to save those humans fighting so bravely against impossible odds, but he was locked in combat with organisms that required his full attention. Shadow Sun's voice crackled across all channels, her calm finally cracking under the pressure. Evacuation is at 60% completion. We need more time, another 40 minutes minimum. 40 minutes. Gohan checked his internal reserves and knew with cold certainty that he could not maintain ultimate form that long. Already his transformation flickered at the edges, his body approaching its absolute limits. He would have to make a choice, the kind of terrible decision that Eldrad had warned him about. He could burn himself out completely trying to hold the line alone, likely dying in the process and guaranteeing everyone's death when the swarm broke through. Or he could fall back to the defensive fleet, conserve his strength, and accept that the evacuation might fail. The choice crystallized when he sensed something massive emerging from the largest bioship. The Swarm Lord itself entered the battlefield, a creature that stood 4 meters tall, even hunched, its 4 arms wielding bone swords that crackled with bioelectricity. This was no mindless organism, but a direct extension of the hive mind's intelligence, a strategic genius encoded in flesh and chitin. It had consumed the tactical knowledge of 1,000 species, absorbed the combat experience of countless battles, and now it focused that accumulated wisdom entirely on Gohan. Their collision sent shockwaves through space that registered on sensors across the system. The Swarm Lord moved with speed that should have been impossible for something its size, its swords weaving patterns that forced Gohan into defensive positions he rarely needed. It anticipated his techniques before he used them, countered his attacks with movements that suggested it had fought key users before in other galaxies. The realization chilled Gohan to his core. The tyrannids had consumed entire universes. His powers were unique to this reality, but the fundamental principles might exist elsewhere in forms the hive mind had already adapted to. The battle became a test of endurance and will. Gohan could not defeat the Swarm Lord quickly because it adapted to every technique he used. The Swarm Lord could not consume Gohan because his energy output prevented any organisms from capturing intact tissue samples. They fought in the void while around them the evacuation continued, each minute bought with blood and effort, each second a victory against impossible odds. Gohan felt his transformation finally failing, his power dropping below the threshold needed to maintain ultimate form. Desperation drove him to attempt something he had never tried before, a technique that combined instant transmission with energy manipulation. Instead of teleporting himself, he teleported his ki directly into the Swarm Lord's body, bypassing its armor and adaptive defenses to attack from within. The creature exploded in a burst of organic matter and unleashed energy, its regeneration overwhelmed before adaptation could save it. The hive mind shrieked across psychic frequencies, a sound of pure rage that sent psychers across multiple systems into seizures. It had lost its premier strategic organism, wasted resources creating and deploying it, and still had not captured the genetic material it sought. The swarm's coordination faltered for precious seconds as the hive mind reassessed and adjusted its approach. Those seconds made all the difference. Shadow Sun reported evacuation at 90% with the final transports launching from the colony surface. The Tau fleet began fighting retreat, their engines burning at maximum as they pulled back toward predetermined jump coordinates. Eldar vessels danced through the swarm with impossible grace, buying time for the slower human and Tau ships to escape. The Imperial strike cruiser, now a burning wreck, detonated its reactor in a final act of defiance that vaporized a cubic kilometer of tyrannid organisms. Gohan dropped out of his transformation completely, his base form barely conscious as exhaustion overwhelmed him. He felt hands grabbing him, pulling him through a webway portal that Eldrad had maintained open despite the psychic strain. The Farseer's voice reached him through the fog of near unconsciousness, congratulating him on survival while warning that the cost had been severe. He woke 3 days later in a medical bay aboard Shadow Sun's flagship, his body wrapped in Tau healing technology that worked to repair damage that should have been fatal. Shai sat beside his bed, monitoring displays that showed his cellular recovery. When she noticed him stirring, relief flooded her expression. "You saved 42,000 lives," she said simply. The evacuation succeeded. The Tyrannid fleet consumed the empty colony and moved on to find richer feeding grounds. Your sacrifice allowed others to survive. 42,000 saved, but how many died? The question haunted him until Shai provided the answer. 17,000 had been unable to reach transport in time, had perished when the colony fell. Gohan felt the familiar guilt rising, but this time he controlled it, acknowledged it, accepted it as the price of operating in an imperfect universe where saving everyone was impossible. The weeks that followed brought unexpected visitors. Primarch Robotgiaman himself arrived aboard a massive battleship, requesting private audience with the anomaly that had disrupted galactic politics and demonstrated power beyond Imperial classification. The meeting took place in a neutral location, a space station controlled by no single faction, with enough security to withstand planetary invasion. Guilliman stood 3 meters tall in his armor of blue and gold, a demigod by any measure, yet he approached Gohan with the humility of a scholar seeking knowledge. They spoke for hours about philosophy, duty, sacrifice, and the terrible calculus required when trying to save civilization from its own darkness. The Primarch saw in Gohan echoes of his father's original vision, before the Imperium had become the tyrannical theocracy it now represented. "Your father understood something mine never had to learn," Gohan said during their final exchange. "Sometimes the greatest act of love is becoming the monster so others don't have to. Your emperor sacrificed everything, including his humanity, to save his species. I can respect that even if I disagree with the methods." He leaned forward, holding Guilliman's gaze despite the size and power difference between them. "But don't let that truth make you forget the goal, a universe where no one needs to be monsters anymore. That's what you should be working toward, not just maintaining the current system because it's familiar." Gilliman nodded slowly, and though his face showed no emotion, his eyes betrayed consideration of ideas he had not allowed himself to voice. Perhaps there is wisdom in your perspective. Return to your universe, Anomaly. This galaxy has consumed enough idealists already, but leave me your teachings so that something of your vision might take root in fertile ground. Gohan worked with Shai and other Tau scientists to compile everything he had learned about key manipulation into a format others could study. Not the full power of a Saiyan warrior, which required genetics no other species possessed, but the fundamental techniques of meditation, energy sensing, mental discipline that could protect against chaos corruption. He taught classes to volunteers from multiple species, showing them how inner strength began with a centered mind and compassionate heart. The Eldar provided the final piece Gohan needed to return home. Eldred had studied the dimensional breach that brought Gohan to this universe, had mapped its unique properties, and compared them to countless other realities in the Eldar's vast archives. Using a combination of key control and webway manipulation, they could open a controlled portal that would return Gohan to his origin point. The farewell was brief but meaningful. Shadow Sun thanked him for his service and hoped his universe was kinder than theirs. Shai presented him with a data crystal containing all her research in case he ever needed to return. Eldred simply nodded, having already seen through divination that Gohan would survive and prosper, that his time here would make him stronger for challenges yet to come. The portal opened in a controlled laboratory rather than the chaotic battlefield where he arrived. Gohan stood before it, this doorway home he had yearned for since his accidental arrival. Yet he hesitated, looking back at the people who had become allies and almost friends despite the darkness of their universe. The scholar's protection methodology, he said, naming what he had taught them. It's not about being the strongest or the most skilled. It's about maintaining your humanity while dealing with inhumane circumstances. Remember that, even when everything seems darkest. He stepped through the portal and vanished, pulled through dimensional barriers by forces that defied explanation. The journey was longer and more difficult than his accidental arrival, passing through spaces between universes where reality broke down into mathematical concepts and abstract energies. But his anchor held true, the same technique he had used to escape Xiancha's realm, focusing on home as a concept rather than coordinates. He emerged in the mountains where his training with Piccolo had been interrupted, falling through clear sky to land in soft grass. The sun felt warmer here, the air cleaner, the very fabric of reality more welcoming to his existence. Piccolo stood exactly where Gohan had last seen him, having perceived only seconds of time despite Gohan's months away. "Where did you go?" his mentor asked, concern evident despite his gruff tone. "Your energy signature completely vanished for a moment." Gohan sat in the grass, letting tears of relief and sorrow flow freely. "I went somewhere dark, Piccolo. Somewhere that showed me how precious what we have is, how easily hope can die if we're not careful to protect it." He would tell the full story eventually, share with family and friends the lessons learned in a universe built on endless war. The techniques he had compiled would become training tools for Earth's defenders, meditation practices that would help them resist psychological manipulation and maintain their principles under pressure. His experience would inform every choice he made going forward, every decision about when to fight and when to show mercy. In distant systems light years from Earth, scattered across Tau colonies and hidden Imperial training facilities, small groups gathered to practice the scholar's protection methodology. They did not worship Gohan as a god or even remember his name accurately through retellings, but they carried forward his teachings, proving that even brief light could cast long shadows in the grim darkness. In a universe where hope was humanity's rarest resource, these small flames burned bright enough to matter, and that was enough.